Hey folks, Joel here. Quick programming note before we kick off the show. This one's a little different. There was a video going around this week from a guy who was talking about his experience trying to get American manufacturers to make his ATM sheet metal work. He also called American manufacturers babies, but the guy brought up some good points. I'm going to play a little bit of it here just so you know what video I'm talking about.
But the biggest thing I'm running into with American companies is that they're coming back and they're just saying like, well, how are we supposed to make this?
So I thought this video was really interesting. A lot of the points he brought up, while not 100% things that I agree with, had a lot of valid provocations. The other guy that I was talking to this week that was very fascinated by this was Caleb Chamberlain from Osh Cut. So we asked him to turn around and hop on the show and just talk through a lot of this. This is less of an interview with Caleb and talking about Osh Cut, which we should totally do sometime, but more of just a general purpose conversation. Went all over the place. It's a little less edited. It's actually not edited at all. So here we go. Caleb Chamberlain from Osh Cut, thanks for coming on. I actually hit you up. This is going to be a funny one because there was a video going around of a guy wearing a WTI Wireless hat, which we'll talk about in a second, that went through and made a video about why manufacturing doesn't work for him using American suppliers versus Chinese suppliers. It was interesting to me. A lot of people were discussing it. I saw you, Caleb, also on Twitter going like, man, I cannot stop thinking about this video. So I pinged Caleb and was like, let's just get on and do a podcast and actually like talk through this, because I think he has some valid points, some maybe not valid, and also there's some parts where maybe there's some missing pieces. But thanks for coming on. I do want to start with this because this was quick turnaround. I woke up this morning and called WTI Wireless because I was like, maybe I can get this guy on the podcast too. Like maybe we can talk to him and like actually get more detail about things. Which I only called because this guy in the video, which we'll link, was wearing a WTI Wireless hat. So I called them and they're like, we have no clue who this guy is. And like, we've never seen him before. We think he got a hat at a trade show. This is not our business. Like, please don't get mad at us. So like, if nobody should be yelling at this guy anyway, because he's just, you know, giving his perspective, but definitely don't reach out to WTI Wireless. But Caleb, like, tell people about Osh Cut a little bit, just as far as like, you know, what were the problems? Why did you start the company? And what are your capabilities today?
Yeah, well, we're on-demand sheet metal and plate fabricator. We do sheet metal cutting, bending, and we do tube cutting as well. And we have other services in the queue. But we started 7 years ago. We exist actually precisely because of the problem this guy describes, which is it's just really hard to get custom manufactured products. We needed stuff and we just couldn't get it from local vendors on any reasonable timeline or any consistent pricing or consistent experience. And we thought, hey, there's got to be a better way to do this. So we wrote software and made it possible to get instant prices, instant DFM, and order sheet metal and plate parts and get them as fast as same day. And so that's why we exist. And so I really, as we listen to this guy, we should pull up the video. But as he described his experience, I was like, yeah, I get that. Actually, he's totally right. It's not a great experience, but it's also solvable. And so I watched that video, and that's why I can't stop thinking about it. Because as I watch it, I'm like, man, this is such an opportunity for anyone to come along and make this better. So
why you didn't start, if I remember correctly, like you were trying to build a product and then that's what ended up leading to Osh Cut because you like couldn't find somebody to build it for you. Was that the genesis?
Well, it was a hobby project, but it was exactly the wrong kind of stuff for a manufacturer. Most manufacturers in the US are really optimized for low mix production with a handful of customers. So when you come along, you don't even have a registered company and you've got this one-off that they're never going to see again. They're just not that interested, and that's why the experience is bad. Because there weren't any companies set up to do it. So, but yeah, it wasn't a product per se, but I guess it could have been if it
was like a simulator thing.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, yep. Alex and I both come from car and simulation dork world. So
Oh,
yeah.
awesome.
All right. Let me, for the people who didn't watch the video, I don't want to run through the whole video. It's about 5 minutes long, but I will hit some high points. So effectively, to set it up, the guy builds like ATM kiosks, but they're smaller. They look like they're like countertop ATM type devices. But what he's actually getting produced, he describes it that they're a software company, but they sell these products. And so he gets what looks like sheet steel that is cut and bent, probably maybe welded and powder coated. And he's ordering all that from the US from China. And that they're getting, they're shipping it over with custom packaging, all of that for about $250 a unit. And his point, and I think this is valid, is that he has looked into, even pre-tariffs, U.S. manufacturers who could do it, who all basically told him two things. At least this is the two pieces I pulled out. Was one, that he didn't have enough order flow, that it was worth even bothering. And then also that even though he was sending them CAD, they were coming back with wanting more assembly and finishing instructions. And then, of course, like their price was coming back really high. So not to immediately put you on the spot, Caleb, because like your business serves obviously a purpose and you have tons of customers, but companies like Osh Cut, companies like Send Cut Send definitely have addressed a hole in the market, which is either prototyping or small batch work. But like, where is the point in your customer set, if it exists, where your type of model doesn't scale and somebody should be going and looking for one of these traditional type American manufacturers that have a job shop with maybe only 5 customers, but they're doing 10,000 units a week? Like, you guys are filling a section here, but would you even be the right solution for this guy for what he's trying to solve?
Well, today, I guess the answer is yes and no. Well, we expect our customers to send us basically manufacturable parts, and our DFM's automated through the website. So if somebody uploads a part that actually can't be just made out of sheet metal in obvious ways, we actually reject it. And what this guy has is a conceptual CAD model that actually isn't manufacturable. So his expectation is that a shop will just figure out how to make it. And we currently don't have a layer to take something like that and turn it into manufacturable parts, but it's possible. So once you have the parts, we can crank them out really fast and really efficiently. And that can include assembly and welding and other steps, which we do a little bit of welding on the side. We're currently ramping into that. So the short answer is I don't think there exists a single company in the United States right now that's structured for high mix, low volume, turnkey manufacturing, which is what this guy needs and wants. But I don't think that business exists yet, including mine and including Send Cut Send.
Yeah, my brain went to like that DFM layer too, where I was like, is that, and Caleb and I were talking on Twitter yesterday, and kind of spitballing ideas. And I was like, is that a business, where it's basically like, okay, you have a bunch of people who have the manufacturing experience, who can take a design file and actually set it up for manufacturing, but are acting as like a middleman or a liaison and saying, hey, I've got these shops out there. But I'll do all of the prep work for that and I'll take a portion of it. I think that would help. But you would obviously then have to have an index of several, if not many, job shops that were out there that could actually do it. And it also seems like then you would have to turn around and spend most of your time on advertising and like letting people know that you're there. And that certainly doesn't remove cost. And if we're fighting China on cost, like that's a problem. But anyway, that was like one way of looking at it. But what has been your experience? As you guys solved like this one section. I'm sure you've looked at stuff about being able to say, we'd like to be able to take in less finished ideas from people and then carry them through to production, because that's another customer for us. But like, what are the hurdles with that?
So there's quite a few. If we can backtrack a little bit, though, I think so. He leads off the video and says, "Hey, if you don't want to listen to this whole video, here's what it is. American manufacturers are babies. They just aren't willing to do stuff." And I I understand his pain, but I want to push back on that idea first of all, because if I walk into GM headquarters with a napkin drawing and say, "Hey, I've got this really cool car concept. I've got $100,000. Will you make it for me?" Um, there's no amount of money I can pay GM to make a custom car for me. That's not what they do. That's not their business. They mass produce vehicles that they design in house. I wouldn't say GM's a baby because they won't do that. But in the United States, you've got a whole bunch of businesses that are optimized for particular ways of doing manufacturing. A lot of stuff went overseas, but the stuff that didn't might be really high precision aerospace. It might be medical. If you're compliant to any standards that are required for aerospace or medical or for defense contracting, ITAR, DFARS. Some guy walks into your shop with a napkin drawing and says, "You guys are babies. You manufacture stuff. Why can't you manufacture my thing?" There's also a fundamental misunderstanding that because you manufacture anything made out of metal, you ought to be able to do anything. But the reality is there's hundreds of industries. In each industry, there's a lot of different ways of doing business. There's different ways of selling and bidding and everything else. So he's right that he can't get what he needs, and I feel for that. But he's wrong that these companies should necessarily be able to help a guy walking off the street with a napkin drawing or an unmanufacturable CAD file. It might as well be a napkin drawing. That said, that long tail of high mix, low volume, turnkey, manufacturing needs in the U.S. completely unmet and completely addressable. And we're actually going there. So to get to your question, what's required? What's the difficulty? Well, there's a lot of different moving pieces to it. One of them is bidding. You have to understand what it's going to cost you to make the part. When he says that, these guys will bid it, but it's $1,200 a piece, and they're not willing to do low volumes, what they're really doing is sandbagging. They have no idea what it's going to cost. They're just making it a really high cost so they don't lose their shirts on it accidentally. So you've got to get good at bidding. You need processes baked in so that you can handle the DFM stuff efficiently, like take his model and turn it into a manufacturable thing. That requires a lot of expertise. You brought up the network of shops. In the US, this kind of work requires high mix, low volume work requires a very, very specific mindset, very specific processes. Most people can't do it because they're not optimized for it. They rather take the other extreme. But there's so many overheads for doing high mix that you have to automate it with software. And as far as I know, there's nothing really off the shelf that can do it, which means you're doing software in-house, right? But so if I want to go and say, "Hey, this part needs to be hot dip anodized or galvanized," sorry, there's one vendor in our entire state that does that, and there's no way I can take one part to those guys and get that done in any reasonable amount of time, or even get a bid in any reasonable amount of time. So we lack the network infrastructure to do it across the board. So anybody who's going to do high mix turnkey manufacturing has to entertain the idea of doing almost everything in-house. So that ups the complexity as well. There's just a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, there's a couple of things here, and I wasn't planning on straw manning his side of it, but there's if it's useful, I will. There's a couple pieces of it that are really interesting to me. One of it that I don't remember exactly the word you used, but it's the attitude, right? And it's what I have experienced with Chinese vendors versus most of the Western vendors is that if you go to any of those shops of any type and you say, "Can you do this?" the answer is always yes. Now, it doesn't mean they can actually do it, and it doesn't mean they're going to do it well. In fact, it is just as common. I do not have direct experience with this, but I know a lot of people who do, where they get a quick turnaround. They feel like everything's going well. The prototypes or even a big batch of a first product comes across and it's not built well, it's not using the process they said it was going to make or whatever, which is why you have so many specialists, including there was another piece on Hacker News today where a guy was kind of more like this, where that's why you have a whole class of people that spend a lot of time in China or wherever the manufacturing is at, because they need to go to the line and they need to go, no, we got to work with here in person to go back and forth to make sure like the output is there. But I think a lot of people look at that and go, well, they're lying a lot of times, so we don't want to replicate that. But the point I'm making is like, not to defend the lying, that's bad, but there is something about that, it kicks off a process. And I think American manufacturing, because it has so many holes in its capabilities, defaults to a no. And they're, as you were saying, they're basically overbidding, because they're doing one of the oldest tricks in the book, which is if you don't want to say no, charge a lot, ask for a lot of money, because if they say yes, then you'll figure out how to justify it. But from a business and customer standpoint, like that's a problem to solve, because there is a bunch of people who don't have the manufacturing knowledge to know what they're asking for, but they could be good partners if they could be taken through a process and brought to that point. The other point, and I want to stay in this space for a little bit. The other point you're making, though, which is very valid too, which is depends on the job. The United States is huge, and it depends on the city and where people are located. Like not every capability is just even within a town or a state. It really depends on where the shop is at. But you work with a company, or you run one of the companies that I think is kind of operating in that first mindset, which is like you're trying to figure out ways to say yes more. But what are like, what are some of the examples of like people coming to you guys and trying to get you to build something where is it a huge percentage of them that are so far off on like what's actually possible that it's hard to just make a kind of set of turnkey solutions that help guide people down there? Like, why is that so difficult, even in a new startup mentality?
Yeah, well, every single manufacturing vertical it requires special expertise. Like, for example, if somebody comes to us and says, hey, I need a pressure vessel, a tank, it needs to hold 5,000 psi of compressed air. We can't make that. We don't have welding processes and inspection processes that make sure that we can make a safe tank. If somebody comes in and says, hey, I need a NEMA rated enclosure, we can't do that either. And there's 1,000 examples of that. Shops tend, in the US at least, shops tend to grow inside of a particular vertical by learning to serve a customer really well. And so they will mass produce electrical enclosures, and that's what they know how to do. Or they'll mass produce boiler tanks or whatever. So we're just a job shop. We're a lot more like a service center in terms of addressable market. We serve all industries, but we have this kind of narrow slice of capability, which is blanking and bending. And if you need that service, we can just do it for you really fast and really cost effectively. But if you need something more custom, there might be a shop that's better suited to it, at least, today. So it's this question of specialization. And I think that's also in part why China might be so good. I mean, they've got this network of manufacturers, an entire like national platform of manufacturing with way more coverage of capability than we have here in the US. And then they've got this Alibaba platform, so that they've got this marketing mechanism as well kind of baked in. We don't have anything like that here.
Question, the missing software layer, like does that software layer exist in China?
I don't know what they have under the hood. I'm not an expert there. I know that if I actually did this after I watched that guy's video, because he's making these little enclosures for ATMs or something. You can get on Alibaba and find a manufacturer that knows how to make that stuff in 5 minutes. There's nothing like that here. There's like a Xometry, and there's Proto Labs, there's Fictive, these broker sites, but these are all like hey, upload a part, get a price instantly or fast, and we'll make your part singular. You're not getting on there and searching for a vendor who knows how to make ATM machines. You know, there's literally nothing like that here at all.
All right. So not speaking, through the lens of Osh Cut specifically, but and you're talking about one of these. You've already given one answer, but if you're in magic wand zone when you're looking at this problem for the U.S. and we're all on the same page, I'm sure, of being like, for a million different reasons, reindustrialization and reshoring has to be solved. Like that largely is, we're on the same page there. But if you had, as you look at the market and from the expertise that you have, one thing here could be, great, we need Alibaba for the US. Like we need just a marketplace of everybody participating. I will say, as an aside, my experience has been that there is and I think a lot of it is like the generational problem. There's a tremendous amount of capability that's just never had to do sales or get new business, or maybe they should have, but they didn't. And the idea of participating using the internet is even questionable for them, which that's a whole other problem to solve. But what other magic wands, as you look across the American manufacturing base, are you like, man, if somebody could invent this, or if we could get people performing or, doing this action, would start to address this customer need where people don't feel like they don't even know where to start in the US?
I kind of think, I wish I knew, but I kind of think the trajectory here in the US has got to be different from what it's been in China. And I think the way that looks is a whole bunch of vertically integrated manufacturers here in the US, whether they're legacy, like onboarding new tools, or whether they're brand new companies like Osh Cut. I think that's probably the path. And the way that looks is, we talked about these ATM boxes. I actually imagine that eventually somebody's going to come along and build a web-first configuration tool where you can go design exactly what you want, or get on the phone and get something more customized, and then have on the back end have a company that just uses that app to break down regional barriers and make it easier to make a customized product for anybody in the United States, and turn it around at a great price. I mean, I don't know that exists right now, but if it did exist, it could conceivably solve this one guy's problem. And then you've got a vendor who really understands how to make that kind of product, but they've fully integrated the whole digital stack so they can do it efficiently and fast. And there's some examples of that. There's a company called Not a Wheelchair that's right next door to us. They make wheelchairs. Ironically, they're called Not a Wheelchair, but it's but you can get online and configure your wheelchair and order it for $1,000, and get it in weeks instead of 6 months to 12 months. Really cool. And I think we'll see a lot more of that kind of stuff, as opposed to this whole like a digital marketplace for manufacturers. Man, in the US, it's like herding cats. We're like 30 years behind the tech curve on that. Not exaggerating. So
it comes back to something you're pointing out too, which has come up several times on the show. Of Shenzhen is always the city that gets talked about because it's the one that I think most Westerners know, and it's the one where it was the most specifically generated or publicly globally known as, like, the Chinese government said, we're going to build a city. It's going to be right across the Taiwan Strait. Like, shipping and all of this stuff will be good. And then in 30 years, technically, but really just the last 20, stood up an entire largely electronics, but other things, manufacturing base. But there's lots of cities around China that are like, this is the metal city, and this is the wood processing city, and all of that stuff. Whereas in the US, sometimes you'll hear the discussion come up of being like, it'll be framed as, do we need to create a Shenzhen of the United States, which is the idea of like, we're going to have one city where a lot of this stuff is located. Or some people take the, other argument of like, well, it should be multiple places. Both of those are, worth discussing, have some validity. But what you're talking about makes me also think of, if you're just trying to do the marketplace layer, but still use the existing manufacturing capabilities from a job shop all the way up to, you know, fairly big things. They're not integrated physically. So you still run into a lot of this stuff of going, like, I can absolutely conceive of building a business that says, give me an idea on the input side, we'll figure out everything, and on the output side, we'll make sure that it's made in the USA. But it makes it extremely hard to do that with any sort of price sanity, because I might have to say, well, even across the US, like, I've still got to put this on a truck halfway through the process and ship it 3 states over before we can do it. So the idea of having Osh Cut, send sort of like industry in a box businesses is really interesting to me, because that kind of solves both problems at once, right? Like you have to put some boundaries on it of capability, but you could be able to say, great, if it's metal, like, we're going to choose to invest in, you guys are in Utah, right? Like, what city are you guys in?
Provo?
Yeah, Spanish Fork, Utah.
Yeah, you know, it's like we might be able to do things like that. Jump in, Alex. Like,
I got 2 thoughts. The first one, did either of you guys see the 1975 movie Rollerball?
Yeah.
James Caan, and you know, neither of you guys saw this movie.
No, I've seen it.
Well, I'm the oldest guy on the show. Caleb, you seen that? Because there's a wonderful.
He doesn't even know who James Caan is. Yeah,
it's in a dystopian, like neo-corporatist dystopian America, where each city is a single industry. And I just remember the announcer before the rollerball match. It's like, Houston, the energy city. Now New York, the finance city. And I was watching this as a kid, living under in the Cold War. I'm like, wow. If that's how your country's set up, it would suck to lose a city, because then you lose all that capability. But on to the real topic. Okay, Caleb, I'd like to know about Osh Cut, the company. Tell me about how that's going for you, because I really want to know is, based on this conversation, everything you've said, if you were to stand up a brand new company in manufacturing today, in the current policy and political environment, and you had funding, what would that company do?
That's a good question. It would do exactly what my current company does.
Okay. This guy's good.
I would accelerate what we're doing, though. I mean, we're bootstrapped. We never took capital, even at the very beginning, and that's affected our ability to grow, I think. It costs capital to grow. So especially in CapEx intensive manufacturing. But we would accelerate. I mean, from a high level, here's what I see happening. We've got we're in the middle of a wave of baby boomer retirements. And these guys are the ones who own maybe not most, but a very high percentage of the manufacturing companies, machining, metal fabrication in the US. So within 5 to 10 years, 100% of these people will be out of the workforce. We're seeing a decrease in overall capacity at the national level. Simultaneously, we're seeing trends toward digitization. People expect to get stuff fast, basically overnight. They expect responsive capability. And simultaneously, there's this tariff environment, which is really incentivizing reshoring. If the COVID logistical nightmare wasn't enough to incentivize reshoring, now we're getting this huge tariff push. All that added up, I think now is possibly the best possible time to be in manufacturing in centuries. I mean, it's going to be massive. Any manufacturer who's positioned to take advantage of this new kind of lack of capacity and to break regional barriers using online systems that are modernized is going to do really, really well. So, long answer to your question, but I mean, this is exactly the place to be if you want to invest in manufacturing. You need a digitally enabled experience. You need to be responsive and fast. You need to be able to do customized stuff for your customers.
All right, I'm gonna double down on Alex's question though. Let's say somebody wrote you a check for $250 million tomorrow and said, deploy
million 250 million.
That's a reasonable amount. That's not a crazy amount.
My fund isn't that big, but go ahead. Pose the question.
I'm talking like it's coming from my fund, which, as we know, is exited so many successful companies. When I invested in I was going to make fun of that other company when I invested in Brain Flake, the children's plastic toys for
those guys are good.
filling microplastics in their brains. You know, it's like an engineering tool. I mean, I shouldn't make fun of it. The guy's doing fine. But let's say, 250 million, enough, I would presume that you could, at a minimum, replicate your current, capability. Would you and you got to pick an answer here, in this hypothetical, would you say, all right, we're going to add capability to our current location in Utah? Or would you say we're going to try to stay at rough parity, but we're going to open multiple shops around the country? Because a lot of people who run businesses like yours are starting to try to ask those questions right now.
Well, 250 million. What would I do with it?
You can also just say
2.5. Well, you should have just said 2.5 million, and then it's a reasonable number.
The number 250 million, though. Without blowing up your spot, you're bootstrapped, so you can say what you want to say or don't say. But do you think that's could you make another Osh Cut for 2.5 million? Would it be more than 2.5 and less than 250? What would it take for you to build your capabilities
we could
multiple
open
times?
an East Coast shop for $6 million, roughly. Maybe less if we skimp. But the thing is that the reason to open an East Coast shop is so that you get better proximity with customers. The reason we've hesitated to do that is because you benefit way more from regional economies of scale than distributed in metal fabrication specifically. So if we take all of our volume in Utah and split it across the country, we're actually less efficient. For fixed costs, that's an obvious thing, but there's also scale economies for on-demand work in particular that only accrues if you can do the work, if you have parity between the two locations. But if you need to be close to a customer and you only manufacture over there because of that proximity, you don't get some of those scale benefits. But we'll open another location once we've saturated our existing space. We can probably double in size before that's the case.
I would think that having regional hubs would impact your shipping costs positively enough that if you are trying to grow the business into larger unit orders and longer, grow into bigger customers, you would have to a certain extent. It depends on what the middle mile impact will be over the next few years, but it's just turnaround times and shipping cost alone have to be a factor. Yep. But is that and it's just hypothetical, but it's is that more your instinct of going, all right, we kind of see where the boundaries of our capability, where we can really serve our customers in a way that we're competitive and we feel good about our service offering. It would make more sense to expand into regional hubs versus saying, I'm going to add hot dip galvanizing and I'm going to add 5 different types of powder coating. That would be expand the potential customer base, but you'd rather stay more in your wheelhouse for now.
Well, I would be inclined, honestly, to focus on adding capability and doing it regionally. The minute you expand, if you want to add a service, now you have to do it in multiple paces. It's just a little bit harder. You have to have parity everywhere for the model to make sense. So adding more services before branching out makes a ton of sense to me. And honestly, our ability to add new services is limited only by people and capital. But there's such demand for it right now. It's not a 10 or $100 million opportunity, and it's at least $1 billion opportunity, and probably a lot more than that. And look at Xometry. This is a broker. They'll do $600 million this year in revenue, and they're just aggregating all this work. And the reason they can do it is because they have this really nice centralized experience where you can get any single thing made. But they're not making finished ATM enclosures, circling back to the beginning of the conversation. And as a broker, their experience is going to be de facto worse than a direct manufacturer who has its act together. It'll be more expensive and it'll be slower. And any kind of problems, there's always problems in manufacturing, those will be harder to solve. So the fact that Xometry, a broker, was able to come in and inside of how long have they been around? 15 years?
Something like that, yeah.
Grow to $600 million. It just exposes how desperately needed it is. But if a manufacturer can duplicate what they've done, but as a direct manufacturer who's executing well, Xometry will become obsolete.
Yeah.
Now it's really, really hard to do, for sure. But circling back to what I would do with more capital, and the bigger we get, the faster we can do some of this, so we can do things in parallel. But we want to become a one-stop shop. We would love to be able to do CNC machining and 3D printing. There's actually sources for 3D printing, so that's a little less important today. But there's bad experiences all over the place, and you just pick one and you solve it, and you pick another and you solve it. But I mean, we could tackle things dissimilar from metal as like furniture manufacturing or sewing, or there's all kinds of stuff that needs to be fixed. So what we found is when we added our instant quoting system, and then we quickly discovered that that's like, I don't know, 15-20% of the problem. The real hard difficulties on the back end and actually manufacturing the stuff when you're doing thousands of unique part numbers per day. How do you keep track of that? How do you get it out the door? So we've built kind of an operating system under the hood that allows us to do that high mix work extremely efficiently. But anything can feed that. So a higher touch turnkey manufacturing service to take a concept and turn it into manufacturable files that can be plugged into that pipeline, totally doable. And that's why I have confidence that we can solve this problem for guys like this that we're talking about.
Is that something that you think you could end up selling, whether whatever the model was, SaaS or a license fee or whatever? Like, is that something? Because by the same token, when you're talking about Xometry, in theory, one of the models that we are kind of talking about here would be every manufacturing company is able to do the Xometry solution. And that would imply that somebody could be like a Shopify model and say, whatever your capabilities are, plug it into this. Your front end looks like your company, and you're paying us however much you're paying us as a SaaS business to do it, but your experience is way better. Like, is what you guys have built internally for your first party stuff, like at a level where you feel like you could spin that out? Or is it still the realities of manufacturing are so complex that it would be like a whole separate business just to try to make that modular enough to sell it?
Well, we've generalized it internally so that we can do more, and that's an ongoing process. The challenge is that the kind of business that we're talking about doing here, I mean, the high volume stuff is already more or less solved. It's what we do here in the US. It's the high mix, the long tail of high mix work that's really unsolved. And you can't like bolt software onto a legacy company and expect it to work. It's a totally different way of doing business. And that's why we've been really reluctant to sell software. But I could actually see a network of sister companies that are very, very tightly related, all on the same manufacturing operating system, all collaborating very tightly and closely to produce any kind of finished good. But the minute inside the traditional manufacturing ecosystem, the minute you have to go and get value-added work done by a third party, everything breaks. Everything takes too long. You want to be on demand, you cannot do that. Everybody's got to be on the same page. Like a whole network of Osh Cut, Cut Sends that do various stuff and that knows how to turn around 3,000 unique part numbers in a day. Like, that's what you need. And I don't know the quickest and easiest path to get there.
Yeah, there's part of me that also, when I'm just going into problem solving mode, I'm like, and I'm not saying this is right, but I'm like, part of it is like, can we teach all the job shops how to use Discord or a forum. It's like literally just, is there some sort of network effect that could start to happen? Because I feel like that's a fundamental problem too, is just like the way you got a business card swapping type of business getting done, and then you have people that are digital first, digital native, whatever you want to call it, and like, is there a way to glue that together? I think that's where my brain always goes, because sometimes as a problem solver, I get one of my weaknesses is if you give me a problem with all of the pieces, I try to integrate all the pieces. But if I were a VC, I'd be going from the other side, looking for companies that were saying, we're going to ignore that and try to fix the next step of the problem. Anyway, Alex, you were
you see where I was going. So, okay. I was just looking at the Xometry stock price, which is down 80% in 5 years. And I mean, my instinct before even looking was that, oh, well, obviously they have a critical role to play. Maybe they were just priced too high when they IPO'd. I don't know. But if you execute perfectly, you open your other shop, everything goes great. Who's going to build that layer? Who's going to build the platform, which in the absence of an industrial policy in the United States mirroring what the Chinese have done, will make it easier for people who need to order parts to find the guys who can build those parts affordably and generate economies of scale? Who's going to build that? Like, all right, I've got a fund. I mean, we invest in deep tech, but a software platform that supports deep tech is adjacent to what we do. Where do I find this person? Who's thinking the way we're talking right now?
Man, I don't know how to answer that question.
That's okay. That's okay. If someone came along and wanted to buy your business from you right now, on the condition that you do something else in deep tech or in manufacturing, is this the business? Is it building the software layer?
Well, you can't do it without software.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
building the layer, that's the missing layer.
Yeah, I have never actually deeply considered the prospect of making an Alibaba style sourcing engine. I think, honestly, getting the buy-in is going to be hard. You're not going to get a shop that's running like it's 1980 to get on a digital platform like that. And because the challenge is in large measure in the execution. And nobody's structured for high mix. Like platforms like this will, by default, be high mix manufacturing. You've got to reinvent how you do manufacturing from soup to nuts. So I don't know. I don't know that there's an easy answer. I think the path there is just so different. Like I said, it's not going to be like China. Even when we do this, I think it's going to be a bunch of. Well, let's see. How do I put this? I think it's going to be a whole bunch of very performant, vertically integrated manufacturing, solving particular problems extremely well, and then soaking up all the demand in those specific industries for those services. A traditional shop won't compete because a traditional shop's not typically that tech enabled. And there's regional barriers and there's scalability barriers because they haven't optimized and built custom software systems. So I think what we're going to see more and more is people like finding a particular pain in a particular industry and then just figuring out how to use tech to just nail it. But that'll still leave gaps. There's thousands of them. So tons of opportunity.
I worry sometimes. So, the framing of reindustrialization right now, you said some of this, we've said it before. It's like, Micro's got his, there's 5 out and 2 in, right? Like there's 5 people leaving for every 2 that are entering any business. And then there's also a bunch of questions about the existing manufacturing capability, especially the smaller family-owned shops. And I have resisted a lot of times the cohort of people who go, those companies aren't gonna, like, they're not good acquisition targets. They don't make sense for a variety of reasons. And I've only resisted that because, again, if you put a problem in front of me, I tend to go, let's figure out how to solve that problem. And maybe I need to go a level up. But you're kind of persuading me, or at least causing me to think about, one of the things that's very different about the problem that America is trying to solve right now versus the problem that China solved over the last 30 years is they basically went from 0 to 1, and we've already gone from 0 to 1 in the early part of the 20th century. And what we have is a very large, still sometimes underestimated, like manufacturing base, but it has already gone through a winnowing process where the companies that still exist are the low mix, small customer set businesses, and they don't. And this is coming back to the prompt of all of this. This is why when a random customer is coming around saying like, "Will you build this for me?" we don't have anybody that wants to say yes because they probably have 5 customers that are doing millions of dollars of revenue each a year. Why would I ever take a risk on it? And I'm not mad at those companies, but the point I'm making is like, that is an incredibly perilous place to be in the United States, because it does basically imply that we're not going to be able to take the existing base and bring it into this next wave, because the structure of the companies themselves, and then culturally within the companies themselves, they're just not incentivized to change. And that, like, I don't have a point beyond that, like, but it's really, it's something to chew on, because I don't think in general it's healthy to have highly verticalized businesses as the only way to go. And I don't mean that from a fear of big companies standpoint. I mean it from a loss of innovation standpoint, right? Like, a lot of really good ideas and companies and products get created through the marketplace and experimenting and all of those things. But we have, and in fact, this guy is representative of a whole section of people I've seen writing blog posts and putting up social media posts who are saying, I'm an entrepreneur, I make a product, but I could only do that with China. And in all honesty, I have a little bit of a cringe to some of that, because I'm just like, are you like, does the world need your product if it can only be built for this, you know, like very low price point? Like, but that gets into some of my feelings about the crap we keep shoveling into our culture. But nevertheless, it's like some of those products are good and people should be able to do it. And what I'm kind of hearing through this conversation is it's going to be, because we already have an existing base that is taking up a lot of the growth potential for smaller, newer businesses. That's a really difficult problem to solve, because we kind of need to rewind the clock back to the days when those job shops were started in the 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s, when they were willing to and able to take on smaller jobs on the promise that they could grow into something bigger. Does that make sense? Like, framing it in that way, like, I don't have a great answer for that right now, but that clearly has to be part of the problem.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think so one thing that we really quickly discovered when we opened our business was that most of the waste is actually office overhead. When you look at lean manufacturing, like the Toyota Way stuff, it's really focused on shop floor operations typically. But actually, if you're doing a single part, like 90+% of the cost of making that part is like bidding, data entry for sales orders, work orders, purchase orders, inventory management, all that stuff. And it's actually, absent tech to help streamline and automate that, it's prohibitive. Like, you just flat out can't do it. So when you go to a traditional shop who has no software savvy and no systems in place, maybe they scaled up and now they have ERP, which means it actually just amplifies the office overhead, because you have to do all that data entry. So these contract manufacturers are doing, high volumes for automotive manufacturers or whatever. And they just, like, there's not a solution. The only solution is triage. Like, decide who you're going to help and be very upfront about not helping people. And this is why, you actually read industry trade publications like the Fabricator magazine, you'll find articles that specifically talk about how to say no. rather than say yes. They're like, well, you can't. And then the way that these companies work is that they want to grow, but they do it on the backs of particular accounts. There's an annual survey that the FMA does, and shops self-report that that the revenue concentration is very high. Like 80% of shops do half their volume with like 20 or fewer customers. So huge revenue concentration. But that's why it's literally the lack of digital savvy, because of this kind of the older workforce who didn't grow up with technology and isn't using it to overhaul their operations. So I think, yeah, to your point, I think what's going to happen is we're going to get a whole suite of new companies or reimagined companies that are suddenly able to do a lot more because there's actually, this multi-decade lag in tech adoption is going to sort of correct itself.
Yeah, that's kind of where my head is going. It's like, if I wanted to just have a successful company, let alone, help American manufacturing or whatever it might be, is to identify a sector that I can address more efficiently and then just go conquest their customers. Like, that doesn't answer, though, which is the beginning of the product development and business development chain, which is the high mix situation, right? But it's like it would address efficiencies in a market that could then potentially grow into companies that could handle high mix better because they've built themselves to be more modular in the future. Which is, to give it a specific example, like instead of going to a company that has 80% of their revenue mix coming from 20 customers and saying, I'm going to drop software and efficiency in on this, you might be better just saying, I'm going to figure out how to build a shop that can service 1/10 of their current production capability, but with like very little operational overhead. And then I'm going to go try to chip away at their customer list with better pricing or better turnaround, whatever you need to conquest it, and then grow into that, knowing that in the future, maybe I just started with like rolled steel, but I can grow into more services that would allow me to do it. I mean, that seems possible, but that's kind of a boring story because it's just like the story of, do the same thing, but do it more efficiently. But maybe that's one of the real obvious places for us.
Yeah, but it's not, I mean, you're describing going head to head with these traditional shops and just stealing market share by being digitally enabled. And yes, there's some of that, but it's also very much a blue ocean. It's very untapped. This idea that you can just get an instant price and have a part sitting on your desk in a day is pretty novel. 7 years ago in the sheet metal world, you could not get that anywhere. And now you can. In fact, sheet metal today is probably the easiest and fastest and most economical service to get prototypes made. And that's new within the last 7 years. And because of my company and because of SynCutSyn. And there's others now too. And that's awesome. And I think that's going to continue, and it's going to get more vertical too with finished product. So what you're doing is you're enabling new ways of prototyping and manufacturing that creates customers and creates demand, because now people can do things differently.
Gentlemen, I'm afraid that I've got to go, but this has been, and we've done a lot of amazing episodes. This has been one of the most inspiring episodes we've ever done. Caleb, thank you, because I've never heard someone so clearly articulate a gap in the market, and also tell me that if he was given a sack of cash, he would still create the company he's got. That's a huge statement of confidence in what you're doing, but also that there is something else that needs to be found. And maybe I hope I can, because I'd love to write a check to that company. Thanks. I've got to go, guys.